Welcome to CivilNet. My name is Emilio Cricchio, and today I'm joined by the one and only Eric Hacopian from the United States. Eric, thanks for your time. How's LA?
How's LA? Well, I would say at this point, Armenia is the center of sanity compared to some of the things you hear here. So that's the way I'll put it.
So let's talk about some of the developing news stories in Armenia. I want to talk a bit more about Armenia's new cabinet. You spoke last week about the Minister of High-Tech Industry, Hayk Chobanyan's being relieved of his post, and you seemed a little dismayed by that. Even though the new High-Tech Industry Minister, Vahagan Khachaturian, has been received generally positively. I'm wondering why you were dismayed to see Chobanyan go and what you thought about this appointment in general.
Well, I think there's been a lot of people upset about Chobanyan leaving. It has very little to do with the person replacing him, which, again, as you had said, that people are generally positive about him personally. What people are dismayed by was Hayk Chobanyan was he was probably the most competent marspet, which is the equivalent of a governor that we had in Tavush. He was sort of a model marspet. And he comes from, I think, the solar industry, tech industry, and he was beloved. He was one of the more capable people in our government. So it was really hard to see him be relieved, given the fact that he has done an outstanding job. And it only made sense for him to get moved if he was going to have something far more substantial. Because in a state where you have serious competence issues, not having someone of his quality in a high position is a waste.
And the new defense minister, Arshak Karapetyan, used some strong language recently. I mean, he instructed Armenian troops to shoot to destroy any Azerbaijani force trying to enter Armenian territory. What did you think of this? Is this just posturing, or is this the defense ministry starting to really assert itself?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm quite skeptical of anyone coming out of the formal defense sector or any of the military leadership, but he's certainly making all the right noises. And he's actually, he's got a fight in him in the sense that he's approaching this in the correct manner. And I think, we have to be aggressive, as he stated, because you have to understand the nature of our opponent in this case. It's, if you look at the nature of the Azeri regime, it's a combination of two things. It's your typical Middle Eastern sultanate with sort of this, racialist, fascist type ideology. And what history tells us is with regimes like that, you cannot have an equal type relationships because they only understand power relationships in the sense that they're either over you or you're over them. So they understand the language of force. And yes, enemy troops enter your territory, you shoot them. And I think his approach is the right one. The tone is the right one. Obviously, you need to have a sustained long period of reform to bring the military up to par and modernize it. But it all starts with leadership and attitude, which has little to do with the resources. It has to do with the way you approach your work. So in the short time that he's been there, he's frankly comes across as a far more stronger figure than his predecessor. Let's just put it to that way.
And there's 15 ministerial positions in Armenia, but only one woman appointment, the health minister, Anahit Avanesyan. Are women in Armenia really so unqualified to be ministers? What did you think about the lack of women in the cabinet?
It's a pathetic disgrace. It's the only way to put it. First of all, I think actually the majority of the Armenian population is women, statistically. Secondly, I'll just give you a very perfect juxtaposition about how ridiculous this is. 2 years ago, I think a study came out that showed that Armenian women had the highest representation of any country in the world in the tech industry, which is very hard for women to get into. I think it was somewhere between 37 or 38% of women in the tech industry, of workers in the tech industry were actually women. when that number in the United States is almost half of that. So here you have, on one of the most competitive, most difficult fields in the world, Armenian women overperforming, and somehow we can't find qualified people in 15 ministries for them to fill one of them. It's a disgrace. I think it's a disgrace on the current government. It's a disgrace on the society that isn't upset by it. This is an outrage, and this happened in the previous administration. And I can tell you something more ridiculous. I mean, you can look at the country to the south of us, as a Muslim fundamentalist state, a theocracy, and you have more women in positions of power in the Iranian cabinet than you do in Armenia, and that's just ridiculous. So this needs to change, and again, this is totally unacceptable.
And in Baku, a total of 46 Armenian captives, POWs, have been handed down hefty prison terms in Azerbaijani jails. There were 3 sets of 13 Armenian POWs, each handed 6 years. So with the longest prison terms at 20 years, what do you make of this?
Well, it's an outrage. It's an absurdity, and it's an outrage. I think we just need to go back and understand why these people are there in the first place. Most people who are in Baku's dungeons at this point, these POWs, or hostages is a better phrase for them, are people who were captured after Aliyev himself violated the ceasefire agreement and attacked the last 3 villages in Hakrut that were under Armenian control. So all of these people were captured after November 9th because Aliyev himself violated the ceasefire. So this is entirely in violation of the spirit of the agreement and everything that came out of it, out of the ceasefire agreement. And secondly, these people are soldiers. What country prosecutes soldiers and POWs and puts them in prison? It tells you about the kind of, totalitarian mindset that is frankly even unimaginable on the Armenian side. Something like this would never happen on the Armenian side. And I think what is most disappointing is the lack of response by the international community, by human rights organizations, by the West, and they play these silly mutual, there's any kind of a moral equivalency between the democracies that respect human rights, like Armenia and the Artsakh Republic, and the neo-fascist regime run by a criminal in Baku. So these are Stalinist show trials. They're a disgrace, and all of these people should be freed today and be back with their families.
And as many of our watchers will know, the European Union has pledged a whopping 2.6 billion euros to Armenia in the next 5 years. This is on par with what they have pledged to Georgia and far more than what they are pledging to Azerbaijan. On top of this, Eurowings, Condor, Lufthansa, Ryanair are starting new flight routes to Armenia. So what do you make of the EU's game plan? Is this virtue signaling? Is this the EU making maneuvers, or is this just benevolence? What do you think?
Well, nothing in politics is just benevolence. I think there's 2 things here. I think first it's guilt, I would say, because of their lack of action during the war, when these 2 democracies were attacked by these 2 totalitarian states, Turkey and Azerbaijan. And the West, and specifically the EU, did very little, send silly, both-sidism type statements. So I think there's an element of guilt here at play, which is fine. I mean, at the end of the day, what matters is practicalities. And I think the second part of it is this is an attempt to counterplay Russian influence here. And the EU, since it really doesn't have a military presence, or really isn't coherently politically organized in most cases, what their way of dealing with problems is spending money, or the way of them having influence is spending money. So I think on the one hand, it's the guilt from the war. The second hand, I think it's designed to have a European hand in Armenia and have a say to counterbalance Russian influence here, which has obviously grown since the end of the war. But I think we need to, the reasons that it matters is irrelevant. The fact is, this is a very good thing. It's going to be quite helpful in upgrading our infrastructure. And the third one, as far as these flight routes, what's important about them is this is sort of the treatment that Georgia got. And they get like 5 million tourists a year, compared to Armenia getting a million tourists a year. And that's a $2-3 billion difference in foreign exchange coming into your country, or money coming into your country. So I think we're going to see an acceleration of the tourism industry in Armenia because of this. So we're getting sort of that Georgia treatment that, you're going to get these favored status. And that actually can be quite helpful. I don't think Armenia will ever reach the Georgian type numbers because it's not the similar type tourist market, but it can do much, much better than we have right now. As many people know, Armenia is actually an exporter of tourist dollars at this point, not an importer of tourist dollars. It's more Armenians who spend money abroad than the other way around. And then that's sort of ridiculous. But I think we have to look at the practicalities, the reasons why something gets done. Yeah, it's important for analytical purposes, but someone's going to spend $2.5 billion. We should be all for it. We should take advantage of it. We should cooperate with them and modernize the country. So I think this is the reasons they did it are not particularly relevant. We just want to see the results, and I think they're going to be good.
And so Eric will be taking a little hiatus for the next 2 weeks until he returns to CivilNet's Insights with Eric Hacopian show when he's back in Yerevan. So Eric, thanks again as always.
Thank you. Nice talking to you again.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.